Well, good morning. Welcome to our final day and our final panel of the conference. It's good to see so many of you out here. I think all of you are the truly hardcore, the true believers who are really passionate about Korean security and all the issues surrounding the peninsula. So thank you for being here. And at this time, I will turn it over to Lieutenant General Ayres to moderate the fourth and final panel. Thank you.
And you're very close to me, a dangerous position. Well, welcome this morning. Really interesting panel on two great subjects, unification and human rights. And to maximize the time we have available, I'll let you read people's biographies if you're so inclined, and we'll get right on with the first presenter, Dr. Scarlatoiu.
Thank you very much, General Ayres. This is one of my favorite topics. I don't often get a chance to write about it. The Romanian president and its applicability to a possible future scenario in North Korea. Now, since this is the human rights panel, and since I am the first panelist, I feel bound to go through a very quick overview of the current human rights situation in North Korea. It is included in my paper as well. What has changed over 2 years ago is that we now have a report by a UN Commission of Inquiry whose main finding is that crimes against humanity are happening in North Korea. Crimes against humanity are being perpetrated by the North Korean regime against its own people, pursuant to policies established at the highest level of the state. This is a country, the only country on the face of the earth, that's still running a political prison camp system. Up to 120,000 people held at 4, if not 5 political prison camps. Are in the process of confirming a 5th one. It's a system where members of the same family, up to 3 generations, pursuant to a system of guilt by association called Yonjaje, are imprisoned at these camps. It's a country that has a loyalty-based system of social discrimination, Songbun. It's a truly abysmal human rights situation. The paradigm has changed, and North Korea is seen differently. Prior to this UNCOI report, perhaps it was seen as a bizarre remnant of the Cold War. What we know today is that this is a country where crimes against humanity are being perpetrated against the people of North Korea. So where does Romania come in? Well, as many of you know or recall, Romania was the one Eastern European country that came closest to Kim Il-sung's North Korea. Why and how? In 1971, the communist dictator of Romania, Nicolae Ceausescu, visited North Korea for the first time, and he absolutely fell in love with Juche ideology, the Juche ideology of self-reliance, with Kim Il-sung style cult of personality. Why? This is in the paper as well. It comes from a former senior diplomat who used to be Ceausescu's Korean interpreter. Basically, the one thing that Ceausescu liked the most was to give these extraordinarily long and boring speeches before large crowds. Everyone in the developing world or in the third world did this for him, but the ones who were absolutely flawless were the North Koreans. Tens of thousands of people dressed up in Romanian national costumes, singing Romanian songs, holding up Romanian slogans. It was fantastic. So he tried to turn Romania, basically, into the North Korea of Eastern Europe. He borrowed tremendous amounts of money in order to forcibly industrialize the country. Then he decided that, pursuant to his own style of Juche thought, self-reliance, he wanted Romania to be self-reliant, so he stopped importing everything, not only consumer goods, but also capital goods, which made people's lives very difficult and completely ruined Romania's industries, and exported everything, managed to pay the foreign debt in full. But this meant that, especially in the 1980s, and I was 19 years old when the regime fell. I was a freshman at Bucharest University. I was right there. And I recall, I have memories of the 1980s, very vivid memories, because I left for South Korea just a few months after the regime fell. It was a terribly oppressive, dark, impoverished place. So in North Korea today, and I address this as well, perhaps one element that is challenging the regime's grip on power, of course, is the markets, the open markets, the black markets, the farmers' markets. They are somehow changing the social dynamic, the way North Koreans interact. Remember, North Koreans have lived under an extraordinarily oppressive society. Life used to be centered only on the workplace and the place of residence. The markets have changed that dynamic. Trust develops in the process as goods are traded from wholesale markets in the border areas to wholesale markets in the provinces to retail markets. Since there is no banking system, all transactions have to be based on trust. So, while the degree of social cohesion in North Korea continues to be very low, due to the markets, the dynamics of social interaction are changing a little bit. Arguably, communist Romania was also a very oppressive place. It was the food line that actually provided a venue where, despite intense surveillance by the regime, people could coalesce to a certain degree. So what happened in Romania? Well, what is known about Romania is that the people rose up, they brought down their government, the military fraternized with the people, and it was all a happy ending. Well, the story is a little bit different, actually. Of course, it was the people of Romania who rose up, of all places, in the western city of Timișoara, which was basically the entry point for smuggled goods. If you will, Timișoara was the Sinuiju of Romania. So it was smuggled goods coming in from Yugoslavia. A lot of families had family members, especially in West Germany, and on a good day being a cloudy day with better reception, they even had West German TV. So, of course, living under that kind of system, it's absolutely inconceivable that this would happen. So a series of red lines have to be crossed. I always ask our North Korean friends, North Korean escapees, what is the red line in North Korea? In Romania, it was the use of lethal force against unarmed civilians. Just like North Korea, Romania was extraordinarily oppressive. Similar population, 23 million in 1989. North Korea today, 25 million. Extraordinarily strict, tough surveillance. Nevertheless, Romania's secret police, the Securitate, had 14,000 agents. North Korea's three main internal security agencies, the SSD, the MSC, and the Ministry of Public Security, have a total of 270,000 agents, many, many more, even so much worse than Romania. But nevertheless, the regime was prepared to crack down on dissent. You would be arrested even before it crossed your mind to become a dissenter. But the regime was not prepared to use non-lethal force against civilians, against demonstrators. So things escalated very quickly. The military had to step in, and the military, being a popular military, this was a shared ordeal. They had compulsory military service. The North Koreans have it too, up to 10 years, of course, for men. So basically, the military simply did not have the, maybe it's not the right way to put it, didn't have the stomach to use extensive, continued lethal force against unarmed civilians. So, a coup happened at the top, of course. The Minister of Defense died of a gunshot wound. It's not clear to this day whether it was a suicide or not. The next man in charge was ordered to bring downtown more armor, more troops. Instead, he sent them back to their units. That's a coup, plain and simple. Now, the truly amazing thing about the Ceausescu coup is not necessarily the fact that he fell, but the fact that several forces coalesced to bring him down. So those behind him represented some very hard-line Stalinists who saw him as having betrayed the Stalinist ideals. There were some Perestroika fans, some Gorbachev-style reformers, and of course there were some nationalists as well. Many of them had been trained in the Soviet Union. This does not necessarily imply that there are any nefarious forces in play, but of course, at the same time, the general who was put in charge after the general who staged the coup d'etat was a proven GRU Soviet spy. And this was published in a book by General Pacepa in 1988, the highest ever defector from the Eastern Bloc. So, well, anyway, the bottom line, and of course the $10 million question here is, can a Timișoara-style uprising happen in North Korea? Of course, Romania and North Korea are two very different countries. North Korea is not a Confucian country, but North Korea has a type of reversed Confucianism. The elites were eliminated. They were replaced by the new elites of the Kim regime, And these elites are once again classified pursuant to the Songbun system of social classification. So presumably it would be much, much more difficult in North Korea's case to see dissent happening to the same extent that it happened in Romania. Now, moreover, once again, the degree of surveillance exercised by North Korea's internal security agencies is way, way, way more intense than Romania, and also the level of indoctrination. Indoctrination was pretty serious in Romania as well. The level of indoctrination, information control in North Korea are, of course, much more intense, much tougher than they were in Romania. But nevertheless, and I hope you do get a chance to read a paper, I also identify similarities that go beyond the cult of personality, beyond the friendship between Ceausescu and Kim Il-sung, similarities along the lines that the argument has been made about North Korea that the reason why this regime has been so resilient is that it is the result of three totalitarian political systems. Imperial Japan, the 40 years of fairly ruthless occupation period, Stalinist communism, and the 500 years of Choson feudal dynasty that preceded the regime. This is not an insult directed toward the Choson dynasty, which was a wonderful period, but it's just the worst feudal practices that have been employed by the regime to stay in power. Along similar lines, Romania's development has always been lagging. Romania, and you will see this points made over the past few years by Romanian scholars, Romania has often been about 500 years behind other Europeans. So every trend arrived late. For example, the great cathedrals of Europe were completed 500 years ago. The Romanian Orthodox Church is building the great national cathedral today, the year 2016. And basically, this goes on and on. So somehow the ground was more fertile in Romania as it is in North Korea for the type of Kim Il-sung, Kim family regime totalitarianism, or the type of Ceausescu totalitarianism in Romania. So the question is it possible? Can the red lines be crossed in North Korea? So one question is, what is the red line as far as the people of North Korea are concerned? One point that has been made is that perhaps markets, cracking down on markets, might represent such a moment. What about the elites? What about the military? Well, arguably, and this has been said by North Korean defectors, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il learned their lesson from Ceausescu's downfall. And some of them basically credit the downfall of Ceausescu for North Korea's Songbun, military first policy. Of course, one big difference, as General Ayres, Bob Collins, Dave Maxwell, and other experts will tell you, is that the chain of command in Romania was military. Of course, yes, there was an internal security officer, the so-called CI counterintelligence officer, next to the senior officers making the decisions, but in North Korea, the chain of command is under heavy political influence. So it's pretty much political. That makes it, of course, more difficult for the North Korean military to cross that line. Now, what about the elites of North Korea? What happened in Eastern Europe? It was first and foremost overseas intelligence agents, senior party apparatchiks, who realized that the system was doomed. So Bulgarian secret services were establishing their own companies in the mid to late 1980s. Well, in North Korea today, the problem is that basically the elites of North Korea do not see themselves as indispensable. They do not believe that, just like their Eastern European peers, they will be the great winners of the transition period. They believe that if the regime goes, they will go. And that is because there is clearly a viable alternative, the Republic of Korea, South Korea. They're not indispensable, they're quite disposable. Moreover, if you look at North Korea for the past 20 years, and Marcus Nolan made this point in a 1997-1998 paper, Kim Jong-il was the one who began creating apparatchik capitalism for the elites of North Korea. They do benefit from this type of apparatchik capitalism that has been perpetuated. Basically, Kim Jong-il ruled through gift politic, through bribes. One argument made by Steph Haggard is that what Kim Jong-un has done has been to continue the gift politic and moreover has been to create more consumption space for the elites, basically by building ski slopes, ski resorts, department stores, theme parks, and so on and so forth. Of course, the bottom line, and this will be the last point I will make before General Ayres drags me outside and kills me. In a country as oppressive as Romania or North Korea, it is very difficult for change to come peacefully. So personally, knowing a little bit about both, my greatest fear is that indeed when dramatic change comes to North Korea, it will be violent and parts of the Romanian president will apply. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scarlatoiu. Now we'll go to the second presenter, Dr. Yu.
I was too drawn to his speech that I forgot about what I was about to say. But I can spend, the alliance between the United States and Republic of Korea is the focus of my paper. And I can spend 15 minutes of allotted time, and I will need 3 more hours to finish, how I would praise the accomplishment and the legacy of the alliance, how it was the linchpin and the instrument par excellence for stability, peace, and prosperity of Asia and Korea in particular. But I will stop my praise with that and move on with other topic. In spite of their great accomplishment and tremendous legacy, I propose that we have a review of the alliance at this time. The recent events of the first half year of 2016 compels us to take another fresh look at the alliance. Why? Because many people have already pointed out, after the fourth test, Matt Salmon of Arizona, chairman of the subcommittee on Asia and Pacific, stated that whatever we have done, our policy has failed. What we need is something new and something creative and fresh. And he said that, and we thought that something really fresh and new would come, and not really much have come since then. Yesterday, I received an email from Dave Maxwell, who reported writings of a British diplomat who spent 40 years in interest in Korea. His conclusion was nothing really, no real serious attempt is being made to really solve the issue. He said, I don't know what the solution is, but I know for sure that whatever we have been doing is not one of the solutions. So we are at that juncture of perhaps taking another good look at the alliance so far and see how we can move on from here. So my structure of my paper is fairly simple. Why we need a reassessment of the alliance. And what was the result of that reassessment? Now, having concluded the reassessment, what do we do from here on? Those are 3 major topics. If I fall short of covering it in 15 minutes allotted to me, I'll have to ask you to do the reading. And the article itself is not really complete. And until I submit it for publication, I still want to go through a lot of revision and expansion and so on. So I will welcome any advice and revision and suggestions from you. Okay, why do we need the reassessment? In 2016, January 6th and February 7th, the 4th nuclear test and then the ballistic missile launching, the satellite launching of, respectively, have brought to the world the awareness. The North Korean nuclear arsenal and delivery system, their development has reached such a point, too serious, too dangerous for the world to ignore. So the international community's reaction to the North Korean provocation has been unusually unanimous, stronger, much more broader, and much more consequential than anything they've done in the past. What South Korea has done, closing of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, what President Obama did with HR, I forgot the number, and the United Nations, of course, 2277. So it has been fairly strong. But what has really changed? Is it really qualitatively different departure from what we have been doing thus far? The conclusion is kind of sad. That is, it will not succeed in denuclearizing North Korea. Because to North Korea, giving up nuclear weapon is like asking for the fate of Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, who they believe were decimated because they did not have the nuclear weapon. They're not going to suffer that consequence. And there are many other points that you know very well, and most of us already come to conclusion without my persuading you that how North Korea will never give up their nuclear weapon because it is their lifeline. They believe that spells the end of their regime and the system, and they're not going to do it, no matter what we do. No sanction, however tough, will do. So and second question is, even if we can succeed somehow miraculously, resulting in denuclearizing North Korea, it still is not the end of the story. They still have chemical weapons, biological weapons, and they are fairly well advanced in cyber warfare. And they are very skilled at the counterfeit money, and they will continue to be a headache and violator, outlaw in the midst of us for a long, long time to come, even if we succeed in denuclearization. So whether we succeed in denuclearizing North Korea or not, whether our sanctions work or not, the result is the same. Situation, as we know, the situation we abhor, that further threat from the further development of nuclear weapon and human rights atrocities will continue to bother us for years to come. So that's why we need to review the alliance. The result of the alliance show three notable characteristics of the alliance operations thus far. One is the operating principles of the alliance has been generally reactive. The main reason why North Korea has been so successful in blackmailing the international community for their own benefit has been the international community, the alliance itself presupposed the two Koreas, two divided Korea. When North Korea disappears from the map, there's no reason for the alliance to exist because it presupposes the existence and continued existence of the status quo in North Korea. Conceptually speaking, it needs a review, another look that will recognize not just the division, but a step forward beyond that. I have some more points, but I'll move on. The second major, so we have been reactive rather than proactive. Second is we have been kind of fixed on military operating mode. We made tremendous technological, we heard yesterday about third offset strategy. That is still a technical issue, still largely in the domain of military technology. It is not a strategic issue. It's not an improvement of a major. So we need to move beyond the military and beyond, and including the political, the historical, the cultural dimensions into it. And alliance has to move, and mindset has to move beyond the military. That's the second thing. The third is whether we like it or not, the Korean unification, the end of the division really would mean the real period to the Cold War era. This is the last stage of the Cold War being fought, but this war cannot be fought the way Cold War was fought up to now, because it's a very unique situation. The uniqueness I don't need to go to elaborate, you know very well. So we need to go out of this Cold War mentality of just containment. We heard and we agree that we need to contain them. The strong deterrence is very important, but that is a minimum. That's not the destination. That's a starting point. We have to move from there to go far beyond that, is my proposal. So we have been too reactive rather than proactive. We have been too limited to military consideration, not paying enough attention to strategic and larger scope. The third is we need to move to sort of a different kind of conceptualization of Western Pacific region, which recognizes our ascent of China and the disappearance of Soviet Union, and then the relative economic power is a $9.2 trillion economy of China now. So those are the results. Now what do we do as a result of it? I suggest three paradigm shift for alliance to consider. Alliance can hopefully ideally dreaming would make this a dark public policy change, but who am I? I'm just making a suggestion for brighter mind higher than my pay grade to think about how to really put into some action. The three paradigm shift I suggest is the alliance begin to consider it's a new mission. No longer defense of South Korea from external aggression, meaning mostly North Korea. The very mission of the alliance should henceforth be unification of Korea. It'll make us be able to be proactive. We'll go far beyond the military considerations, and we will now begin to really think beyond the Cold War terms and begin to prepare for the new era. So that's the paradigm shift number one. So the second shift of a paradigm I recommend is what is it? is the change of that. The second one I have for each of them is many reasons. About how to, the question of, unification is the ultimate mission, then how do you get, this is a detail that I cannot get into. A good friend of mine has written a book called Unification is Bonanza. It's translated into English as bonanza or jackpot or gold mine and so on. It's a mistranslation. Actually, 대박 in Korean has a lot different implications. 대박 can be a result of years of painful effort. It's not just a sheer product of luck, like hitting a jackpot on a card game. So bonanza is like that, jackpot is like that. 대박 is, if you read his book carefully, which actually has changed it, since his publication, November of 2013, November of 2014, after the publication of the book, and President Park Geun-hye's quotation of the book's title, the interest in unification by Korean people, especially the young people, have increased by 30% from 52 to 81%. It was a very influential book. I highly recommend you to read it. This is, we suggest the alliance to take another look at this 대박 approach. This 대박 approach has a few principles. One is one mistake we have made vis-a-vis North Korea is we have always treated North Korea as one entity. North Korea is becoming more diversified kind of society. First of all, two big divisions. There is this Ceausescu-like, Kim Il-sung-like, the regime, the elites who support and who has a lot to lose if the system changes, great personal stakeholders, elite of North Korea. And then those are people we have to be very tough with. Eye to eye, I would say one eye, two eyes. The defense minister Kim Jong-un's approach about you shoot one and we'll shoot 10 back. Strong, security-oriented, deterrence-oriented, containment-oriented approach. We must continue all the way. But we have to also consider millions of people, 20 million some, 5 million people who are suffering in their hands. We cannot treat them as the same. And now among them, there's a beginning to division with the emergence of this, street kind of markets, and then the introduction of the external information and the trade and over the Yalu and Tuman River, which I just visited about just a few weeks ago. So that's a paradigm shift that I really propose and for serious consideration. And then I will, because of time, how much time do I have here?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. I will perhaps just go through what I underlined so that I don't, This is one point, especially for the alliance vis-a-vis China. Throughout its history, Korea has often been the lightning rod of regional disputes as the middle ground between the two largest powers in the region, including the U.S., between the U.S. and China is the crux of the matter. Both countries are afraid that Korea, the united Korea, may tilt a little too much to the other side. The concern we are very aware of, but we want China and the United States to think differently of it. First of all, America need not be afraid that united Korea will be too close to China. Korea has suffered at the hands of Chinese for like hundreds of times. Every time China was united and strong, they messed with us. Every time they were divided and fighting amongst themselves, they left us in peace. Same is true with Japan. Before the Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi united Japan, they left us alone, except just some regional small incursions on the coastlines. America's interest is not to see hegemonic power to rise in East Asia. So the United States can continue to have a foothold in East Asia. That interest is the same as United Korea's interest. We don't want any hegemonic power to be in East Asia to mess with us again. 2, United Korea will never be that close to China because after all, communist China. We are the free and prosperous, the vibrant United Korea can never be really friend against the United States with communist China. Why would America ever have any kind of fear about that? China needs not be afraid that Korea will be too close to the United States because after all, they're just right next to us. We can't mess with them. I mean, the moment we mess with them, what happens? What they did with Vietnam right after the end of Vietnam War. They're just, we are stone throw away. Just a few minutes ride will get them right into Pyongyang and into Seoul. We have to always have to sort of respect this courtesy of a neighbor. Be respectful, and cater to that. That America has to respect the Korea's delicate position, and do not insist that we become kind of spit on China kind of United Korea. We can never do that. We're just too close to them to mess with them like that. Korea is predestined to play a peacemaker role, mediator role between these two great powers. If they ever come into conflict, the whole world will pay for it. So Korea has a role to play for the great country. And this is why we need not be afraid of it. And there are many more things to say, and now it's over. So I will just read the conclusion. Can I read just 1 minute conclusion? No, yeah, I know. I don't have to. That's Hugo speaking. Yeah. In this present environment, what can be expected of the ROK-US alliance? Should the approach to the alliance be one that is largely reactive to North Korea, or could it adopt a new approach, namely the goal of Korean unification, that would break the cycle of provocation and punishment that has come to characterize the Korean Peninsula for decades long? To do so effectively, the alliance will need to intensify its diplomatic outreach to China, Russia, and Japan, and more clearly highlight the benefits that Korean unification holds for them. The current moment could be the golden opportunity that the alliance needs to move beyond the status quo and lead the region to long-lasting peace and prosperity. One last thing in relation to Greg's presentation a minute ago, I recommend to take a look at a movie called Autobiography, Nikolai Ceausescu. You see a picture of Kim Il-sung with Ceausescu in a very sickening thing to me on a stage, observing and enjoying 100,000 people moving like clock parts to make them happy. And they were very happy. Anybody who sees 100,000 people laboring to make them happy is a sick people, very sick people.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yu. Now, Dr. Kang, it's your opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I'm very delightful and privileged to present what I'm thinking on the, especially people's mental world in two Koreas. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, to give me a few more minutes for my presentation. I think English is my second language. It's very difficult for me to speak English fast. So please allow me to have a few more minutes, especially 2 minutes. Okay, before I present my presentation, I will give you some good information. I will let you know the North Korean way of clapping. I personally analyzed and watched North Korean people's behavior very carefully. So I understood that kind of action of clapping. There are three very important elements. One is the location. You have to spread your arm and you have to put your two hands in front of face. If you're going down, you're going to be a Jang Sung-taek. If you go up, maybe Jang Sung-taek will wave your hand, his hand. And the second important thing is the speed. You have to clap 80 times within 20 minutes. 4 claps in 1 minute. Very fast, enthusiastically, you have to clap. And the last one is the voice. With the baritone voice, you have to say hooray, manse 3 times. If you have a soprano voice, maybe Jang Sung-taek will wait for you. And so like this, manse, manse, manse. If somebody scream alone, maybe they will be a case of Jang Sung-taek as well. Yep, nobody left. Okay, today the serious problem in South Korean society is we are in lacking of concept definition. I think yesterday Dr. Lee from Kinu mentioned about North Korea is our bad brother. I don't think so. We are in relation with North Korea. It's hostile relations. It's very difficult to say North Korean people as brother. Maybe American citizen can be our brother because we are sharing same political ideology of liberal democracy and the liberal market system, and we are very excellent in alliance. So I think that kind of misunderstanding of conceptual thing are very often in South Korea. So my presentation would be an answer to that kind of misunderstanding on the concept definitions. Yeah. I think you better consult with my presentation papers because I will lead. I think actually page 1. Introspection of a quarter-century-old nuclear crisis. Yeah, in the previous session, the historical review of North Korean nuclear crisis have been well treated. So I'd like to omit, and instead I would like to comment on the South Korean understanding on nation in terms of ethnic race. Despite the recent situation of North Korean nuclear crisis, the South Korean society has been likely to be divided into 2 parts. And it's quite related with the issues of characterizing the North Korean people and their regimes. Many intellectuals in South Korea have been obviously confused in concretely understanding philosophical concept on ethnic race, nation, and nationalism under the South Korean regime of the liberal democracy. I think, in order to effectively explain that kind of problem, I took the theological background of romantic nationalism. Okay, page 5, the influence of romantic nationalism in 2 Koreas. What is the romantic nationalism? I think it is not easy, but actually, we are very familiar with the Thomas Hobbes, Friedrich Hegel, Immanuel Kant, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, all the Enlightenment philosophers. But we have some dissonance with the Johann Gottfried Herder, Johann Caspar Brunelleschi, Johann Gottlieb Fichte, Konrad Boronhag, those who built the theoretical background of the romantic nationalism. I think, but in the case of Fichte, is very well-known philosopher. He stressed the importance of a German Geist, German spirit, as the inseparable concept of nation, the romantic nationalism maintains, in the case of Peter, a very strong, risky element of supporting irrational counter-Reformation activities, which can be misled into Nazism or fascism and any other totalitarian ideas. Okay, let's see the influence of romantic nationalism in modern Asia. It's very interesting. After Meiji Revolution, Japanese intellectuals inherited German romantic nationalism in order to build a modern state in a relatively short period. Germany, which had been in the process of the late industrialization, building a strong, unified, and powerful modern state in a very short period under the Emperor Kaiser leadership, was the best model for Japan to follow. The inherited romantic nationalism by Fukuzawa Yuichi and Inoue Desjiro inherited to China by Kang Yuwei, Zhang Bingnin, and Yang Chi-chao. Particularly, Yang Chi-chao's theory largely influenced the Shin Cheo of Joseon, Korea. Shin Cheo, a Korean modern historian, theorized the basic concept of romantic nationalism to fight against Japanese imperialism, to liberate Korea. Shin Cheo fully recognized the concept of nation as an organic and historical body, and he created for the first time in the history of Korea the concept of Hanminjok, one grand Joseon ethnic nation. He also redecorated the myth of Dangun, Tengri. If you go to the Central Asia, there are so many Danguns. Tengri, Dangri, Dungun, Dangun, like this. It's myth. Anyway, Shin Cheo made an effort to advocate the ethnic Korean nationalism against Japanese imperialism. His collective resistance awareness had been strongly linked with history, culture, and ethnic solidarity. Until now, Shin Cheo has been admired by the North and South Korean people as the reformer and fighter for the national independence, and especially as the creator of the concept of Hanminjok. Okay, I will omit the case of South Korea. I will talk about the romantic nationalist influence in North Korean case. At first, North Korea denied nationalism, but followed the Stalin's concept of national ideology in the communist frame until 1960s. However, North Korea national ideology became connected to the Juche ideology in 1970s to 80s. Nation was defined as a social group where blood, language, culture, and territorial commonness are on the basis through the history of independence of people. North Korea's own concept of nationalism was at that time established. In the process of idolizing Kim Il-sung as a hero king for the North Korean people, it was a well-known story that Kim Il-sung directly ordered his close ideology researchers to plagiarize the cases of idolizing the Japanese emperor soon after Meiji Revolution. The concept of North Korean nationalism in the Kim Jong-il era became much more romantic and cultural. In 1989, Kim Jong-il said, "Nation is nation-state living in the same territory with one blood, language, and culture." It's very important, Kim Jong-il directly borrowed indoctrinated the concept of nation from the Hanminjok of Shin Cheo, making Kim Jong-il himself as a legitimized hereditary of Dangun. Then the heroic ruler of North Korea, Kim Jong-il, can be automatically legitimized to unify and to govern the currently divided two Korea. Therefore, it is quite strategic for North Korea to intentionally establish the concept of nation in order to achieve highly goal-oriented mission of revolutionizing South Korea. Okay. Page 10, the illusion of ethnic national unification. I will read the final part. The ethnic relation has nothing to do with the unification process in Korea. It is definitely an illusion to think the South Korean regime of liberal democracy can be easily moderated and possibly harmonized with the North Korean totalitarianism under the concept of same ethnic nation. Unification is definitely a realistic conflict between the two different regimes in which only one regime can finally be survivable in the long run. So as a conclusion, whether the recent sanction against North Korea plays a role of a game changer or not, it seems to me the process of Korean unification would not be easy and seem to be highly time-consuming. Although it is very late to restart a new strategic access toward the Korean unification process, South Korea should do a few principled actions against North Korea. I think as far as Kim Jong-un rules North Korea, a gradual process of national unification theory, such as the way of 한민족 unification, 한민족 통일 방안, or the way of the South and North Commonwealth unification, 남북 연방제 통일 방안, should not be considered. Instead, South Korea should admit North Korea as a legitimate authority, thus enforcing North Korea unable to avoid strict regulations from the international community. If North Korea breaks rules and treaties, then South Korea should also simultaneously break the treaty with North Korea. In that sense, there is no need for South Korea to keep the joint declaration of the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula anymore. If South Korea really wants to consider the unification of the Korean Peninsula, it should be realistic and abandon a feeling good and moralistic wishful thinkings on the process of Korean unification, and completely separate and isolate the North Korean revolutionary regime as a hostile foreign country. That would rather shorten the roadmap of Korean unification. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so Dr. Kang, thank you very much. I agreed to give you 2 extra minutes, and you took 2 less than you originally had. So you set a record. But Dave Maxwell, you're the first discussant.
All right. Thank you, sir. I think everyone will agree. 3 great papers and some diversity of opinion. First of all, let me talk about Greg's paper. And let me talk about Greg. I think you'll all agree that Greg is really a national treasure for America. There are a few people that have the breadth of experience on the ground living through a revolution and then being such an expert in human rights in North Korea, experience in the UN, and of course his organization, HRNK, had much to do with the UN's Commission of Inquiry and the recognition of the human rights atrocities that are being committed in the North. So he's a national treasure, and I'm proud to say that he's a U.S. citizen, and this is why immigration is so important to the United States. Because we wouldn't have this national treasure if we didn't. I think his paper is very, very important. We spent a lot of time looking at Germany as a model for unification. We know that's probably not the best model, but I think as a way for the regime to fall, we learn a lot of lessons from Romania. But what's really important about his paper is that he is really, the comparative aspect of both regimes is really important for us to understand. And he's gone into great depth, more than 10,000 words, in really analyzing the regime. He talks about the legitimacy of the Ceausescu regime, and on page 12 there's a passage there that is really worth highlighting. I won't read it, but I will call attention to the fact that it reads just like Adrian Buzo's book, Guerrilla Dynasty. And Kim Il-sung and Ceausescu did almost the same things to bring their own brand of nationalism and how they organized their societies, as Greg said, got rid of the elite and really developed the personality cults and upon which those regimes are founded. And of course, for Kim Il-sung, the legitimacy of the party and of his rule is based on anti-Japanese partisan warfare. The fact that North Korea is a revolutionary, a great guerrilla society. And so I think it's very, very important to look at that. Of course, he asked the key question, is a Romanian-style collapse possible? And I think he asks a series of questions that we should all be focusing on. Have Kim Jong-un's purges enhanced the loyalty of senior officers, or have they made it more likely that a Romanian-style scenario may unfold in North Korea? Are North Korean internal security and military forces trained and equipped to use non-lethal force to crack down on large-scale demonstrations should they happen? I don't think so. And if, despite surveillance, punishment, and indoctrination, large-scale demonstrations do happen, will the North Korean military be ready to use overwhelming lethal force against the civilian population? I'm afraid, I fear that that might be so. And will the KPA, a similar popular military sharing in the misery of the military experience, be ready to use lethal force against mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters for an extended period of time? That's unknowable. And so I think those questions are really, really worth examining. But what's most important, and especially important to my special operations brothers and sisters who are here from Fort Bragg and Fort Lewis, and and who are looking at this problem, Greg says that an information campaign is really, really important in influencing second-tier leadership, influencing various elements of the population. And one thing that and I fully agree with that, and that is so important. I recommend, really, to my Korean counterparts that one of the things that is so influential in the North now is Korean dramas. And I would recommend a comprehensive campaign using Korean dramas to educate the Korean people living in the North about unification, the process of unification, what unification will look like, how they will be treated. And I think that developing those dramas as entertainment will plant seeds in the minds of the Korean people in the North and how unification will unfold. Dr. Ryu, I fully agree that unification is the way of the future. I agree. I think a reassessment of the alliance is useful. I do think that unification, as you mentioned, the 2009 Joint Vision Statement does say that peaceful unification is the goal of the alliance. And of course, whether it's peaceful or not is really dependent on North Korea. Because why? Because the enemy has a vote. And so whether there's conflict or not will really be determined by the regime and by the North. I kind of take exception to Cold War criticism. There's a lot to learn from the Cold War. And we should not, and just because the division of the peninsula is a vestige of the Cold War, we should not, mischaracterize it and say that it is an anachronism. It exists. We got to deal with the world as it really exists, and not as we wish it would be. What I'd ask you in your paper, though, for your 3 paradigm shifts, is to answer the question of how you gain public support for these paradigm shifts. And I think that's really important. How do you generate the political will? And that's a tough question. I do question your statement about Cuba and Iran as models we perhaps should emulate. Based on the paradigm shift, I'm not sure that would really generate the political will, at least here in the United States, to support the outcome. Dr. Kang, I think everyone will agree you have a very controversial paper. I'm really surprised to hear, from a Korean that, the North and South are so different, and that the illusion of ethnic national unification, must be something that we should prevent. I am happy, though, to hear that you call the United States your brothers and sisters. We share values, and I think that's really, really important. You hear me use the words Korean people living in the North. I try not to use North Korean people. Because I do believe that that it is one Korea, and I think that despite the differences, the last 66 years, 68 years since there still is one Korea. And I'm reminded of an anecdote that I heard at a conference in Seoul a few years ago. And in fact, you may be sitting in the audience, the retired ROK flag officer who I heard speak at lunch and say this, and he said, there's 2 miracles in Korea. And of course, Americans, we kind of scratched our head. We all know the miracle on the Han, how Korea developed out of the ashes of the Korean War, from a major donor recipient or aid recipient to a major donor nation, the rise politically, culturally, economically, into a great middle power that it is today. And so, yes, we know the miracle on the Han. He said, well, there's a miracle on the Taedong. And what? What is the miracle on the Taedong? He says, well, the miracle on the Taedong is after 60 plus years, the Korean people living in the north continue to survive. And despite the hardship that they've endured, they continue to survive. And the lesson for me is that it is the spirit of the Han, Minjuk, whatever Koreans, however they characterize it, that if given the opportunity, Koreans will thrive, as the Korean people living in the South have done. And faced with hardship, the Korean people will survive, as the Korean people living in the North have done. And to me, that gives me hope that there is still one Korean spirit, and that unification is possible. And again, despite the differences that exist today between North and South culturally, even in terms of some language, I think, if you take Dr. Yu's presentation, you take Greg Scarlatoiu's presentation, especially the emphasis on an information campaign, you can close that gap and prepare for unification. And I think that's what we should focus on. And with that, I will stop and cede my time.
Dr. Kim?
Yes, sir.
10 minutes.
Okay. Last night, I returned hotel and I entered the ICKS website and visited the first annual conference held in Doubletree Hotel, Penthouse City, 1996, November the 15th. So it's very, as one of the founding members of the International Council on Korean Studies, I would like to introduce shortly, as less than 1 minute, the first annual conference there. Under the theme of two Koreas in the world affairs, with most prominent 60 panelists plus 200 general participants, 7 panels were moderated by prominent Korean studies scholars in the United States, including Dr. Il-Peng Kim of University of Connecticut, Dr. John Merrill, State Department, Dr. Hangyo Kim, University of Cincinnati, Dr. John O., the Catholic University of America, unfortunately he passed away, Dr. Chejin Lee of Claremont McKenna, Dr. Byung-Jun An, the Yonsei University at the time, he was a visiting scholar at the George Washington University. And Dr. James Morley, who was a professor at former Columbia University. So at the time, Patrick Morgan, I was a panelist, panel 1 discussant at the time. So he came yesterday. I was glad to see him. Yes, sir. Under the theme of the Korea and East Asian security, we consider that ICKS inaugural conference in 1996 was a turning point of Korean studies in the United States. In the post-Cold War period, particularly after the death of Kim Il-sung in 1994. Since then, ICKS continuously held its annual conferences and published academic journals 2 times in a year. The editor-in-chief now is Dr. Tara Oh. She is here. 20 years ago, I was a junior member as a Secretary General. Most of members were more than 10 years older than I. So now, there is no such young Hugo Kim here. Okay, let me get into the Greg Scala's paper. His paper, he evaluates the current status of human rights in North Korea from various perspectives based on most recent information. His discussions are so much instructive that I have nothing to edit. And also, I do not have anything
disagreement with him. Second, Greg also evaluates the collapse of the Nicholas Church regime in Romania, 1989, saying that the ultimate success of Romanian revolution was ensured by a coup d'etat, but the transformation resulted in democratization with pre-market economy, joining NATO in 2004 and EU 2007. Since Greg was a native Romanian, he is my teacher in Romanian affairs. So I'm not qualified to comment on Romanian affairs, right? Number three, Greg tries to compare the liberation of Romania then with North Korea now, based on their dictatorship and friendship relations with two leaders, Kim Il-sung and Cho Se-joong. However, there were many differences rather than similarities in two cases. So what are they? So I shortly, they don't experience the Korean War. They didn't find it. No civil war. Second, Soviet Union collapsed, but China remained strong, right? That's the second point. Third point, degree of control and method of control is notorious in North Korea. Very restrictive and well organized. They are smart to killing people. Right? So that's 3 points is very, but your writings is so real, so I cannot skip this word. Telling the people North Korea 3 basic stories. Number 1, the story of their own abysmal human rights situations. Number 2, the corruption of their leadership. Number 3, the story of the outside world. Please, yes. Okay, I'll move up to the Jay's paper. Jay is my close friend, but discussion is honest as an academic person. So don't take it personal, right? Okay, as you may know, my good friend Jay has developed his time and money for the Korean unification many years until now. You may know about the big rally in Washington metropolitan area, investing $1 million to mobilize that movement. It's big. Yeah. I'll skip this part, but I'll take 3 points. Strategically, the U.S.-Korean security, I served 25 years in Army, Korean Army officer. My second life is here as an American citizen. I'm fair, so I have right to say for American, for South Korea alliance, honestly. The Korean security alliance is not only to defend South Korea, but also to secure U.S. strategic interest in Asia against other powers in the region, right? The primary goal of the U.S.-Korean security alliance is not the unification, but to defend South Korea. Though United States like to help unification. That's my first. Second point. The Korean unification is beneficial for all Koreans in terms of economic integration without wasting of resources, put the money to military coming from confrontation between two countries. However, its unification is not the primary goal, but rather the ending result coming from effort toward democracy and free markets. If we get there, automatically unification comes out, right? Of course, we try to reach there, but it's a result, not the goal. Okay, that's my opinion, different. Okay, 5 more minutes, thank you.
You're on the board, we can impeach you.
Okay. Number 3, I cannot agree with, you didn't mention exactly insist, but partially implying that it might access wide range of notions, including temporary suspension of joint exercise. You didn't insist it, but that word is bothering me. I think without clear step of denuclearization, we should not consider any compromise in dealing with North Korea. Look at their behavior last 20, 30 years. That's my point. I'll move up Dr. Kang's paper. Actually, I've been writing history book, 7 series volume, Western Civilization. Now I finished my draft, book 4. So book 4 was the 1750 death of the Louis XIV to the 1815, the fall of Napoleon. So I have some knowledge about nationalism, romanticism. Okay, 2 minutes, thank you. I wrote the nationalism. The conquest developed nationalism as the movement of resistance against Napoleon by making themselves hated oppressor and thus arousing a patriotism of other oppositions of French nationalism and showing the people Europe what nationalism was, what nation in arms could do. That's the definition. Romanticism, I wrote my definition. Romanticism, the spirit of French Revolution was based on Enlightenment rationalism, but German intellectuals developed the thought of Romanticism, challenging of every aspect of French rationalism. Okay. So your theory is applied Romanticism to nationalism of unification in the process of North Korea. Frankly speaking, I do not know how much your theory is related to the unification of North Korea, but my knowledge is too short to comment on your paper. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Yu?
Yes,
opportunity.
thank you, General. I am so happy and honorable because I am the last panelist to wrap up today's conference. My first comment or question will be focused to Mr. Scarlatoiu. First of all, I hopefully agree on the most of Mr. Scarlatoiu's observation and his opinion, analysis and his assessment. Thank you very much for that kind of observation or assessment. I hope and expect the Romanian-style civil revolution in North Korea in the near future, even if the age of red revolution has already passed. However, the age of blue, human rights revolution, will come to become a reality soon in the next decade in North Korea. That means I expect and hope that the revolution from above and the revolution from below will be simultaneously realized in North Korea. However, in North Korea's reality is not easy one. There is situational difference between Romania and North Korea. Romania in around the 1989 years and North Korea today. In the Eastern European region at that time, the mood of civil resistance for human rights had been dominated. Therefore, uprising or resistance movement in Romania has been much easier than in today's North Korea. In North Korea, as you mentioned, the first generation Kim Il-sung had been very, very much frightened by Romanian civil uprising. And from then, try to prevent that kind of revolution. And the second and third Kim's successor know Romanian case very well and has applied every kind of control, oppressive policies. However, Romanian experience is not an exception as far as concerned on revolution from above in the situation of a survival game. North Korean apparatchiks, cadres will try to find their survival when they expect South Korea and the United States guarantee for their survival by such kind of general political amnesty or discharge, and some support for them after success, the revolution, as you pointed out. As far as concern on revolution from below in North Korea, population can transfer the negative and passive resistance to the positive and active uprising when they have also credibility to South Korea's policy, supporting them after revolution. Therefore, in the situation of total oppression and expansion of a small, informal, or open market reality, 장마당, the situation of the revolution from below will be met. The situation of the revolution from the situation of revolution from above will be met the situation of the revolution from below. This is my expectation in the same way with you. Here, my simple question is how long we have to wait for that kind of revolution? Within 10 years? Within 5 years? From now. My second question is on the effect of international sanction on the North Korean regime. Is the international sanction effective on human rights in North Korea or not? And recently, much money to invest to a small and informal open market. North Korea has about more than 350s. Has been infiltrated from the North Korean defectors, escapee, now living in South Korea. When South Korea prohibit North Korean defectors' remittance to North Korea, North Korean family, and the close Kaesong industrial complex can make 장마당 very difficult and some negative effect. What is your observation? Do you have any idea to be able to resolve this dilemmatic, contradictory situation? And third, comparing Romanian case, do you have any evidence on pro-Russian military officers or pro-Chinese military officers having an attitude against the Kim Jong-un's regime in North Korea? I like to turn to my question, turn to Dr. Jae-Peng Ryu. You are really idealist as far as concern on Korean unification. Already, as already Dr. Kim pointed out, the idealist proposal is very respectable and appropriate unification movement. But as policy recommendation, there is some realistic problem. Unification can be a foundation for peace, and to establish peace and stability can be a basis for unification. I hopefully agree with you in general, but reality is not accept your new, creative, proactive paradigm shift approach. Unification can be a result of the various reasonable, realistic, and pragmatic efforts, but it can be a strong purpose of the government and people. When we try to achieve, unconditionally achieve that kind of unification, we automatically fall into the mood of romanticism or romantic nationalism. Already, both of you pointed out. One caveat, as we must distinguish reality and wishful thinking, as Dr. Kang particularly pointed out. And if we try to transform purposeful, wishful thinking into reality, we have to pay much higher cost. And if international sanction for denuclearization of North Korea is eventually not effective, do you have something new, alternative approach? According to your proposal, your answer is Korean unification. As you know, without unification, there exists no solution in your answer. Again, our problem remains how to achieve the goal of unification. Here, our policy and strategic dilemma is denuclearization is the way to achieve unification. Without the denuclearization or de-ICBM, any kind of approach to unification could be impossible in real situation. North Korea is still denial on coexistence and peaceful relations with South Korea. In the past, diplomatic approach for cooperative security or mutual survival with North Korea has also been ineffective. North Korea always rejects the true reasonable negotiation. Therefore, there is no way without change or collapse of North Korean regime. The desirable wishful thinking to create balance of prudence, but reality is to maintain balance of terror for even called armed peace. In reality, there exists no solution other than peaceful absorption of North Korea by South Korea. And the more reasonable, pragmatic approach to achieve peace first, and then try to achieve unification second. So we need defense, deterrence, peace, and also unification with the United States. United States' role is to coordinate with China in open or secret way. So North Korea always demands South Korea's unilateral concession. Without confidence from North Korea, we cannot go jackpot. President Park's proposed jackpot approach. How to induce North Korean confidence to South Korea. So your idealistic new approach is also a conundrum, you said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Yu. So I'll give each presenter 3 minutes to respond to anything that you wish to that's been brought up by the discussion. So Dr. Scarlatoiu, you go first.
Thank you, General. So how long do we have to wait? Well, the stars have to align. Once again, red lines have to be crossed as far as the bottom-up uprising is concerned. The stars have to align as far as the elites of North Korea are concerned. What is it going to take to see, once again, the Stalinist, the reformer, the military officer, and the nationalist get together and bring down the regime? North Korea's elites, as Bob Collins would say, continue to be controlled by a vicious cycle of privilege and human rights denial. North Korea's entire population continues to be subjected to this deliberate policy of human rights denial. It is, of course, very difficult. It's a point I make in the paper. The age of revolution is late teens, early 20s. Every North Korean man age 17 to 27 is in a military uniform at that age of revolution. Indeed, China is an extraordinarily important factor. The difference between Budapest 56, Prague 68, and Bucharest 89 was that the Soviet Union did not intervene. Soviet tanks were on the Romanian border. They never came in, although an attempt was made to bring them in, and please do read my paper. There is some information on that as well. So basically, the Soviet Union did not intervene because Ceausescu had crossed a line. The line he crossed was that he refused to adopt Gorbachev-style perestroika and glasnost because he thought of himself as an independent, autonomous leader, very different from the Soviets. And of course, this was a direct threat to his own grip on power. My question is, are we ready for the Twilight Zone? I'm sure that General Ayres, Dave Maxwell, and Bob Collins will have an answer for that 1, 2, 3, 4-week period when the regime is still in control and there are demonstrations and people are dying in the streets. Will we have the political will to do something to intervene while the regime is still there, still in power? Do the sanctions affect human rights in North Korea? No. The sanction regime is aimed to do two things. Number one, prevent the development and proliferation of long-range ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. Number two, to punish the elites in charge of that proliferation by severing their access to luxury goods. Good luck with that. They can purchase them in any department store in China, or now that North Korea and Russia have reverted to using Russian rubles in their bilateral trade, they can buy their Ferraris in Russia. So implementation is always a big problem. The sanctions regime had nothing to do, but absolutely nothing to do, unlike South Africa, with the human rights situation. Now, finally, we have our own US North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act that finally includes human rights in the behavior that's subjected to the sanctions. How about Kaesong? Well, Kaesong was very tightly contained. The North Koreans are really good at containing the social side effects of any interaction with the outside world. So as far as those 52,000 workers are concerned, they'll be simply assigned to different positions. While they prevented the workers from going back to the zone, I had no idea where they were. Did you? I'm sure you didn't. That's how tight social control is in North Korea. So what influence does Kaesong have on the North Korean human rights situation? Let us not blame the South Korean government or the South Korean administration. Let us blame not the sanctions, not the South Korean government, but what Bob Collins coined as the deliberate policy of human rights denial. Finally, and remittances. Well, Kaesong, of course, used to yield about 120 million a year. Remittances, 10 million a year. For the families back home, whatever they send back home, it probably does make a difference, but in the grand order of things, this clearly does not have an impact on the overall human rights situation. Great question. Were there pro-Russian officers amongst the North Korean revolutionaries? Yes. There were, and there were quite a few of them, and they had, what many of them had in common was that they had gone to the Frunze Military Academy. And remember, Kim Jong-il did purge graduates of the Frunze Military Academy, possibly in reaction to what happened in Romania. And obviously, I'm not assuming any kind of conspiracy, but what I'm saying is that from the Soviet viewpoint, once they saw individuals who spoke Russian, had studied in the Soviet Union, were quite sympathetic to the Soviet Union, they were secure enough to decide that they did not have to intervene. They did not have to assume control of the situation. Basically, there was a lot of that going on behind the scenes. One final point that I would like to make about Romania, it's very important to remember this in the case of a unified Republic of Korea. Transitional justice is extraordinarily important. Transitional justice does not involve only trials, prosecution. There are truth and reconciliation commissions, amnesty, and so on and so forth. But what's truly important is that lustration is extraordinarily important. The Romanians did not do it right. The old elites, second, third tier, second, third echelon, remained in power. And basically, they ensured that they were protected. They had full access to Romania's new political scene. They stayed in place, and for this reason, the country, although a prosperous liberal, well, a liberal democracy doing pretty well in terms of economic growth, the country is still having problems today because of the inadequate transitional justice process that should have been conducted a quarter century ago. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Yu?
David Maxwell made some good suggestions. One is that he quotes the 2009 joint statement between President Obama and President Lee Myung-bak. And 3-4 years later, same US president with the current President Park restated the importance of the alliance and stated to notice that peaceful unification is the ultimate aim of the alliance. So what we have here is the national leaders of the two countries have already defined the purpose, the mission of the alliance be unification. And then what we do now is the continuing practice of the past. There is in between a gap. What I propose is let's fill this void. Let's fill this gap and make the practice come closer to the stated vision of our national leaders. And the second, the Cold War, this is a very important point that Dave suggests. There's a Cold War is here, whether we like it or not, at least in the eastern fringe of East Asia. But there's one important opportunity that we may lose if we continue to think only in Cold War terms. I think it is a very delicate thing that China has come this far. They have joined even wording of the UNSC Resolution 2277. They have come not far enough for us. They are not going to come too far for us on their own. They may just take one more step if United States does the right kind of cajoling, persuading, and so on. This has to be done beyond the Cold War mindset. So, and then it was pointed out by different commentators, I'm too idealistic, utopian thinking. That's true. But I hope I'm not an idealist with much illusion. I do not have any notions about persuading Kim Jong-un to become human again. I do not believe any persuasive ideas for unification will convince him to do away with their 3-generation-old dynastic oppression. I don't suffer from that kind of an illusion. I'm an idealist, but grounded very solidly in a fact. A fact, though, not yet realized. Unification will not happen if we just look at the past. Unification will come if people begin to look at the future and think of it this way. Unification is going to come one way or the other, sooner or later. United States, in the long run, not next 5 years or 10 years, next 100 years or 200 years. Think of that. United States must begin to define its relationship to Korea in terms of that long-term view. And then they will see they want to be aligned with the efforts for unification, and that will be a long-standing effort. United Korea for United States will be like Israel is for Middle East for them, like England is for the United States. I think once they begin to see that, US will begin to move. United States today suffers from inaction. Strategic patience is a justification, lip service for do-nothing approach. What will make them move? We continue to talk about China will do this, China won't do that. That's not realistic, that's too idealistic. Nothing will move. Something will have to move, and that will have to be some picture in the future. And then we must, Dave pointed out, generally agrees with me, and what my key point, it is true. How to generate public support for this? Two things. One, we must generate public support for it, but how to do it is one question. But public support for what must be also clarified. Public support is for, may I have a couple of minutes that he didn't use?
I already gave him to Dr. Yu.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, yeah, where was that? Okay. Where was that? I lost 1 minute already.
I gave you an extra minute already.
Okay, yeah, I think that this future orientation, I'm not an idealist or utopian thinking. I'm a futurist. And we have to imagine a future, because it is some picture with future that will determine what the steps we take now. We have been walking this way, so we'll continue to walk this way. That's not realistic. That's where we want to go, so we must move that way. That's not empty idealism. That's not just utopian thinking. There's one of the most practical things. That's the only thing, that image of the future that everybody likes. One message that we must generate public support for is united Korea will benefit everybody, will harm and threaten nobody. And we Koreans have to persuade this. International Council for Korean Studies, which I'm asked to serve as a board chairman today, hopefully will begin to play this role here in alliance with One Korea Foundation, with the Security Council, US, Hanmi, 자유연맹, all of these together. We have to generate public support, because we cannot rely on government, generals or diplomats. It has to be NGOs, public support to do that. And I think the Romanian case illustrates to an extent about the same thing. I have a lot of other points, but if there is a time...
Wait till I ask you questions,
yeah,
please.
that's right. There may be some
Thank
other
you very
questions.
much,
Yeah,
Dr.
right, right. Thank you.
Dr. Kang, it's your opportunity.
Yeah, I think it will be the first time to use romantic nationalism to understand the mental world of North Korean people. It's very difficult to understand North Korean people's mental world. Can you understand? They are very lunatic. As I told you, we can say it's very funny looking to have that kind of North Korean way of clapping. It's very funny to us, but to them, it's a matter of to be or not to be, the question of Hamlet. They are living in absolutely ultra-totalitarianism, which is originated from romantic nationalism. To understand North Korean people's mental world, to rationally, scientifically understand North Korean people's mental world, we should do something. We don't know about them. Can you understand them? It's very difficult. So this is one way to understand North Korean people's mental world, by using romantic nationalism. Typically, they are originated from romantic nationalism. Just a totalitarian, one for all for one, like this. It's not three musketeers. They work like one body. King for people, people for king. Yeah, in 1990s, after Kim Il-sung's death, they have kind of march in suffering. Can you understand march in suffering? Now, after U.S. unprecedented sanction against North Korea after first nuclear bomb test, Kim Jong-un proclaimed to North Korean people to ready for second march in suffering. Romantic nationalism is very, very dangerous. Okay, think about the end of World War II, the battles between U.S. Army and Japanese soldiers in Okinawa, Iwo Jima. What did Japanese soldiers? I think after failing the battle, they suicided. There was a lot of kamikazes like this. So it's not easy. Yeah. Anyway, and now, we have to have, I will conclude, we have to have a strong deterrence and strong containment policy against North Korea. As far as Kim Jong-un lives, it is impossible to have peaceful unification in Korean Peninsula. After success of Musudan missile, now I'm sure that North Korea will use the coercive diplomacy against South Korea. Then, have we prepared that? No. Just, we don't think about that kind of mental regime, political regime. Just think about, as a same nation, is brothers is just wishful thinking, and we have to prepare for the reality, and we have to prepare for the very bad situation. Even we have to consider the human cost. I think yeah.
Thank you very much. So now we have 25 minutes left for questions, that's all. So as every moderator does, I will ask you to ask a question when you're recognized. Don't give a speech, and direct your question at one or the other of the presenters or the discussants, please. So right here, General Chun.
I am going to go against your orders and just make a comment. Free market in North Korea. North Koreans have said that everybody has a mistaken knowledge of North Korea. They state three things, and one of those is free market in North Korea. What they say is, free market in North Korea is not really free. It's connected by bribes. The person who's selling something is bribing the police, the security guard, the guard at the border, and everybody. So they have a new apparatus of bribery that is going on. And it's actually a new form of control. So it's not generating free thought or anything like that. It's actually created a new apparatus of control within the North Korean society. It's very intriguing. So I think we should all take into account that this free market is not the kind of free market that we're thinking about in our minds. Secondly, the drama part that Dave mentioned. There's a movie, a documentary in 2015 called Chuck Norris versus Communism. So I saw that documentary. It was it was about Romania, by the way. So I asked my North Koreans, because I had never thought to ask them, hey, what about those dramas that you guys are watching in North Korea? Is it going to make any change for you? They said, number one, it's only the elites that really watch the South Korean drama. 90%, the ones that need to really uprise and realize the truth about the world, they don't get to watch the South Korean dramas. So the ones that are watching the South Korean dramas actually have the LG TV and the Samsung refrigerator in their houses. So for them, if something happens in North Korea, their world crumbles, and they don't want that to happen. Another thing, if you look at Chuck Norris and communism, there's these, they have these TVs, they have these VCRs, and these people all, Well, in North Korea, it doesn't happen that way. They told me that in North Korea, the family watches it, but these are special families, special in the way that the mother and father and the children have a special bond. Now, if this is a dysfunctional family, what would happen in North Korea is the kids or the father would report their mothers and fathers and have them dragged away in the middle of the night. So it's quite different, and I think it goes to Dr. Kang's statement that North Korea is totally different from what we're thinking. And that's another reason why when you're talking about human rights, I mean, I ache every day when I think about what's going on in there, and you mentally try to block out what's happening. But the fact of the matter is, in order to liberate the 200,000 people, we are going to have to kill 10 million of them.
Okay,
So-
thank you, General Chun. Let's give someone else a chance to ask a question. This
yes,
young
sir.
lady back here.
Thank you, sir. Amanda Mortwidow, Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. My question is for Greg Scarlatoiu. Greg, how do you think North Korea has learned from Romania's transition, and what's the relationship between North Korea and Romania today?
More questions?
No, we're doing one at a time. Go ahead.
We answer them now? Okay.
Thank you for the question, Amanda. So the Kim regime has learned from the downfall of the Ceausescu regime. Basically, it has intensified the surveillance, the information control. Of course, as we know, more information is entering the country right now through these informal markets. And at the same time, it understood that it had to keep the elites under control by subjecting them to the cycle, the vicious cycle that I mentioned earlier, involving both privilege and human rights denial. And it's those, as Bob would tell us, those who are at the very core of the mechanism of human rights denial who benefit the most. What has North Korea learned from the Romanian transition? Well, what North Korea has learned from the Romanian transition is that if you are under such an extraordinarily oppressive regime, change can only be dramatic, and change involves the removal of the top leadership, of the leader at the very top. It's the only way to do it. Whether it's morally, ethically, legally right or wrong, these are questions to be asked later. There were a lot of questions that should have been asked in the Romanian case as well, but this is the only way to prosecute real change. One lesson that they could have learned from the Romanians, once again, was that the great winners of the post-communist transition in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union were the very elites who used to be in charge before. And if you take some time to read my paper, you'll see that the National Salvation Front, which was supposed to be in charge of an orderly process toward free elections, actually turned itself into a political party, ran and won by a landslide, assuming the networks and infrastructure of the Communist Party. So it was actually the Communist Party that turned itself into a different political entity, but continued to stay in charge. Luckily for Romania, Romania joined NATO and the European Union. There were standards that had to be met. This was tremendously helpful. In the case of Romania's transformed elites, belonging to the European Union, joining the European Union, actually enhanced their status. Believe it or not, some of them are European parliamentarians right now. In the case of the North Korean elites, integration, and the only conceivable integration, is the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Integration will result in the removal of these apparatchiks. Once again, if they look at the Romanian president, they understand that, unfortunately for them, they are not indispensable, they're quite disposable.
Okay, thank you. Next question right here. Yeah.
Thanks. My name is Don Kirk. I was actually in Bucharest when all that happened. I took a train in there, and I'd already been there before. And people approached me and gave me notes and talked about the Securitate. And there were lots of signs of dissent long before whatever happened on Christmas Day that year. I've been in North Korea a few times. Nobody's given me any notes. Nobody's sneaking any notes to me about protesting against the regime. Nobody's talking to me in cafes about what they think of the regime. Is there any sign whatsoever of anything? Frankly, I think the Romanian comparison, in other words, is extremely misleading. Is there any sign whatsoever in North Korea, any sign of the kind of dissent that I saw many times in Romania before and during the transition that you talked about? Thank you.
Well, I think that the very fact that North Koreans escape from North Korea, the very fact that there are 30,000 defectors in South Korea, is proof that some of the people living inside North Korea do see the light. Organizations such as Intermedia and others conduct monitoring and evaluation of public broadcasting to North Korea. Of these defectors, of course, it's not 1/3 of the entire population of North Korea, but of these defectors, more than 1/3 state that they used to listen to foreign broadcasting, foreign radio, and this includes South Korean radio as well. So even under that extraordinary degree of surveillance, control, coercion, and punishment, and you're absolutely right, Don, North Korea is so much more intense than Romania, and nevertheless, Romania was the most oppressive country in Eastern Europe. I think Romania, well, yeah, great comparison. Was it Romania? Was it Albania? Well, extraordinarily oppressive, no foreign travel, always under the watchful eye of the Securitate. Indeed, it is much, much more difficult in North Korea, but there are so many NGOs run by North Korean defectors in South Korea and elsewhere, even here in Virginia. So, of course, dissent has not reached a critical level in North Korea. We might be a very long way from that. But nevertheless, there are North Koreans who understand what's going on, and through these markets, and General, thank you for your great points. This is a point that I make. We hear this question all the time. Well, you keep talking about Songbun, but isn't money important in North Korea today? You make a great point. It's also included in the paper. It's those of good Songbun who have the best market access. At the very least, you need access to those of good Songbun in order to create market opportunities for yourself. So through these markets, more information is entering the country. Again, great point. If North Koreans watch South Korean TV drama, it doesn't mean that they know how to process it. That they were not raised or trained to understand, to process this information. So it's basically a matter of having the 10, 20% who get to watch it. They watch it. They had a great time, good-looking actors, beautiful actresses, they nice drive cars, sip nice coffee in Korean coffee shops. It's not as easy to ask the next round of questions. Why are we so different? Why are they there and why are we here? But nevertheless, this type of actionable information is entering the country. And the best answer to your excellent question is we need to make sure that more of that information is sent into the country, because ultimately change can only come from the people of North Korea themselves.
Okay, thanks. Just right over here. Yes, you would.
Thank you. My name is Ki Young-soo. I'm working for Korea Institute for National Unification. In this panel, we had a variety of discussions on unification issues. Among them, I'm going to point out only one thing. Dr. Kang made in his paper a very great and powerful argument here. Korean peaceful unification could be wishful thinking. I also think achieving unification on the Korean Peninsula solely based on the peaceful negotiation between the two governments on an equal footing is going to be fantastic, but it's totally unrealistic. I agree with that. But I think throwing away the key spirit of peaceful unification on the Korean Peninsula should be a different matter. Domestically and internationally, we had a broad consensus that on the process of unification, we need to rule out the mobilization of military power and violence, firmly based on Korean constitution, and it's also a diplomatic agenda, as Dr. Liu Jae-pung mentioned, between the ROK and the United States. So I think the throwing away the key spirit of peaceful unification could be an unwise way, strategically, diplomatically, and morally in pursuing our allies and good neighbors. Of course, we need to prepare a contingency plan. We need to carefully watch what's going on in North Korea. We need to be prepared. Even if unification occurs tomorrow, we need to be prepared. But we need to still pursue a peaceful way of unification, because if you look at the South Korean politics, the Hanminjok community unification formula should be also upgraded and revised, but it is formulated in the close consultation with the different parties and different civil society at that time. So I think we need to be a little bit more careful in figuring out, in arguing that the peaceful unification is wishful thinking.
Okay,
so
thank
that's
you
my
very
small
much
comment.
for making
Thank
your
you.
point. Question? Right, this young lady right here.
Hi, I'm Sally Barth. I'm a student in the Security Studies program here at Georgetown, and I have a background in psychology. So for Dr. Kang, I wanted to ask you, I haven't read your paper, so sorry, but it seems that you're saying that because of this indoctrinated romantic nationalism, it's impossible to have any sort of unification. But I want to ask you whether or not you think it's possible to change that indoctrinated ideal, because from a psychological perspective, any indoctrinated idea can be changed with, and I know it's feasibly difficult, but do you have anything to say to that?
Can I answer? First question, Dr. Sang, I think, in the case of peaceful unification, there is a prerequisite condition. In the case of peaceful unification, we have to dialogue, negotiate with the other part. But in this situation, as far as Kim Jong-un lives, now Kim Jong-un hasn't got any idea to abandon nuclear weapons, and after Mustan missile, successful Mustan missile, maybe he will, strengthen his regime in North Korea. In that case, how can we, the political regime of liberal democracy of South Korea, moderate with the ultra-totalitarianism of North Korea? It cannot possible to negotiate. So first, we have to get rid of Kim Jong-un first, regime change first. After that, maybe we can consider a negotiation or dialogue with North Korea. That is my proposal.
May I address that? Yeah. The question was not directed to me, but it seems fairly clear there is a sort of image of North Korea that needs to be clarified. There is a North Korea, one picture is a very strictly, thoroughly controlled society for a long, long time, that people have to clap right to be recognized. If you don't, you suffer you get exterminated. It's a country where a father cannot speak freely in front of his son, fear that he might report him. There's that kind of North Korea. That's for sure. There's another side of North Korea that we must also think about. You have seen, as you entered, a book called The House of Cards. Do you see that? This is a house of cards. Any visitor to Pyongyang is associated with a minder who sees to it that everywhere you go is followed, recorded. You cannot talk to the person on the streets. You cannot meet anybody. You cannot take pictures of it. Why do they do that? Because if they let it happen, if they let people just get off the airport and walk freely in Pyongyang and go to the countryside, the house of cards may fall. When China was succeeding by leaps and bounds economically, Kim Jong-il visited various places where China was experimenting with the new ideas of Deng Xiaoping. He tried a little bit with Najin Sanbong, a little bit in Siniju. Why did he fail? Why do they not go far enough? Because if they open it too wide, the house of cards will fall. It is that very solid North Korea there is there, and there's very vulnerable, scared, paranoid North Korea. We cannot deal with just one Korea. We cannot say, this Kim Jong-un is a bad guy. We cannot negotiate with him. We cannot reason with him. We'll just have to make him an offer he cannot refuse. That offer has to come from the United States and China. We are not going to achieve a peaceful resolution by having Kim Jong-un agree to it. We are going to make an offer that he cannot refuse. With China, United States, South Korea moving it right, that can happen.
Okay, thank you.
Think about it.
Dr. Kang, I'd like to ask you to answer the young lady's question, which is about the psychology of dealing with this brainwashing that's gone on.
I think
I
Dr. Yu is very
addressed that.
nimble to get attention. I think first thing, Kim Jong-un and elite group are quite different with the other North Korean people. They don't care about other North Korean people. The other ordinary North Korean people are just expendable. And romantic nationalism rationalizes everything. They justify everything in terms of romantic nationalism. They lived in romantic nationalism in 70 years. Wow, it's quite difficult thing to settle. I think in that category, you can imagine relationship of your things. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question right here in the front.
Well, Dr. Tae Kim, I don't know how many of audience agree with me on this notion. Well, as far as human rights approach is concerned, I think that is everything when we approach all kind of North Korean problems. And if North Korea improve human rights, then it will be democratized. And democratic North Korea will not allow the existence of the nuclear weapons. And also, the human rights approach should be the starting point and also conclusion of unification. So I personally emphasize too much, actually, the importance of human rights approach. But unfortunately, as pointed out by Dr. Klingner yesterday, international community is very much inactive in this regard. So my question is, will it be possible, of course not now, but anytime sooner, will it be possible for the international community to apply the so-called concept of R2P to solve the human rights problem in North Korea? So you know R2P, right? Responsibility to protect concept. Yeah.
The Human Rights
Yeah.
Organization, yes. R2P at the UN, for example, can be a fairly controversial issue because the first thought that comes to mind, of course, is military intervention. There is much more to R2P than just that. And we have seen Security Council action elsewhere. Of course, in the case of North Korea, things are a bit more difficult. On the upside, we know that we've had 2 meetings of the UN Security Council in December 2014 and December 2015. North Korea, the North Korean human rights situation post-UNCOI report, post-2 Human Rights Council resolutions, post-2 General Assembly resolutions was discussed. Indeed, it's a procedural matter when the issue is just placed on the agenda. 9 out of 15 votes of permanent and non-permanent member states are needed. Once it's taken up, it becomes substantive, and basically any P5 member may exercise the veto. And that's where we're likely to run into problems. My response to that will be, okay, no problem, continue bringing it up. Every time a member, a permanent member of the Security Council, blocks action aiming to deal with the crimes against humanity in North Korea, that state is placing itself in a position where it's aiding and abetting a regime that's committing crimes against humanity. Moreover, using the veto of the Security Council is no trivial matter, and especially when it comes to mass atrocities, the use of a veto at the Security Council can be, quite tricky business, I would say, if you are the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China. And yes, we all know the human rights situation is quite terrible in those 2 countries as well. So efforts at the UN must continue. The UN is not the silver bullet, but it's one very important tool in the toolkit that we have at our disposal. A point that I want to make is that we have not seen a large-scale grassroots campaign. Look at the big human rights organizations, the Amnesties and the Human Rights Watches of the world. They have addressed North Korea, but have we seen anything on a par with what was done in the 1980s to do away with South Africa's apartheid? What North Korea is doing is perpetrating crimes against humanity. And, we continue to see basically a basic lack of understanding of the nature of the problem. Human rights is not a nuisance. Human rights is not an obstacle in the way of resolving the other tough issues, the nuclear issue, the missiles issue. Human rights violations are at the very core of North Korea's regime's modus operandi. And you're absolutely right, and I fully agree with you. It is the human rights situation that must change first, and then we will see positive change.
Okay. So thank you. That's the last question. We are out of time for the panel. I'd like to thank the presenters and the discussants, and we're going to go to the concluding portion of the conference.